Hi, this is Megha Joshi, the host of the Boardroom Zen podcast. This show is created for the ambitious business leaders. Are you someone wanting to play big? Want to possess a strong brand and executive presence that makes you belong in every room you walk into? And all of this without putting your personal life on hold? If the answer to those questions is yes, then you are in the right place. In this show, I sit down with best-in-class leaders to distill their wisdom while sharing what helped me stand out as a Fortune 100 executive. So let's get started. Our guest today joins us from the vibrant city of San Antonio, Texas. As the CEO of Geekdom, he leads a community of innovators who are dedicated to nurturing the startup ideas. His journey began with the U.S. Air Force, where he served for over 8 years. Thereafter, he ventured into the corporate world and quickly moved up the ranks to lead Geekdom. Drawing upon his extensive background in engineering and technology, he continues to ignite innovation and amplify Geekdom's influence across the city. Beyond his very impressive professional persona, he's a devoted father to 2 extraordinary daughters. In his free time, he enjoys traveling and hiking around the country. Please join me in welcoming none other than Charles Woodin to the show. Charles, what a delight it is to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It means the world.
Thank you, Charles. What a privilege. So, Charles, you've had a pretty fascinating journey so far, starting from the U.S. Air Force to now becoming a catalyst for change and for the entrepreneurial dream. Did you ever see yourself running an organization like Geekdom as its CEO?
Absolutely not. To answer that question as succinctly as I can, I definitely did not. I grew up in Michigan, so across the country. Didn't have any idea that I would end up here, let alone running a company as amazing as this and just on such a impactful mission. It is an honor, and I never would have imagined the series of events that led me to get to this point.
Yeah, and I really want to unpack a lot there because you've oversimplified your achievements here in that opening statement. But I'm just so curious, Charles, what turn of events led you down this path? Starting with the Air Force, you were doing great. In fact, I was listening to some of your previous podcasts and reading about you, and you've had assignments in Japan and Middle East and other parts of the world. So clearly you were doing great in U.S. Air Force, and you served for quite a while. And then you moved to becoming a rising star at Apple when you were driving their business consulting realm. And now you pivoted completely to the entrepreneurial space where you are sparking innovation. And that's just, all of that, it just sounds like you've touched so many different dimensions that anybody could touch in their career. So what was going on there?
Yeah, I mean, it is when you say it like that, it is hard to imagine how those ties bind, but I'll do my best to try to make those connections. You know, when I was in the Air Force, I loved what I was doing there, and I thought that it was going to be something that I would be doing for a career. And then my last assignment was actually as an instructor, and I did not want to be an instructor. I really thought that was going to be something I did not enjoy. And so I made the decision at that point that when I was given those orders, this was going to be the last 2 years I spent in the United States Air Force. And that I would get out after that and I'd figure out what my career looked like. I didn't really know at the time, but then I ended up joining the instructor pool up in San Angelo, Texas. So West Texas, middle of nowhere. And I fell in love with what I was doing there. One of the things that I really grabbed onto was this idea that I was helping these young airmen find their path into their professional career, and watching them go through that kind of dramatic change from learning to then becoming a professional was an amazing part to be instrumental in. And I loved being a part of that journey. And so when I had still committed to myself, I was going to get out. And so I decided to move along with that. And I moved down here to San Antonio. And I was like, I'd taken everything that I'd learned from being an instructor and decided that the most ingenious thing to do was to become a student right after that. And that was not a bright idea. And I started, really struggling being a student here, but I still wanted to be important here in San Antonio, and ended up finding my way over to Apple while I was going to school. And I just fell in love with that company. I love their mission. I love products that they create. And I just love the opportunities that they gave me. I ended up joining the team being, just kind of front of the line employee, part-time, and then ended up becoming full-time, and then found my way to the business consulting realm. And for me, it was such an instrumental change. And the reason for that was I fell in love with solving problems. If you presented me with a puzzle, you presented me with any problem you could think of, it would become almost something that I could not let go of until I finished. And the feeling that I would get once I completed it was so rewarding that I sought that feeling quite often. And so when I became a part of the business consulting world, it grew. And the reason why it grew was because I wasn't just solving one person's problem at one time. I was now solving several people's problems, whether that company was 10 people or 5,000 people. That one solution that I was providing that company was much more impactful. And then that feeling that I got was so much more rewarding. And then I had this one fateful day where I came into the building that I'm talking to you in today and really had never thought that I would take an opportunity here. But yeah, it kind of struck me in a note that I wasn't ready for. And I'm happy to talk about that, but I don't want to derail the conversation.
No.
Give you a little bit of updates about what led me
here. This is great. And the common thread I hear in your journey is the desire to make an impact on the lives of many more people through your abilities to problem solve. And that's fascinating. So I'm really curious, Charles, to learn a little bit more on what made you transition here. So what drew you to Geekdom?
So what really drew me here was one of my former bosses at Apple actually had converted over here and had been the COO of Geekdom at the time. He came into Apple, sought me out this one day, ended up asking me to come down and just see what Geekdom was about. I knew what he was aiming for, and I was going to show up just because of what he meant to me. But I had no intent on taking any job opportunities because I knew where I was heading with Apple. I knew what my next step was. I knew I had a future. My wife at the time was pregnant with her second child. So I was just super excited about what the future had looked like. And I walked into this building, 99% sure that no matter what we talked about, I would leave saying no to. And then I had this kind of core memory from my past unlocked. And what that was like I had mentioned right at the beginning, I'm born and raised in Michigan. Around Detroit and Flint. And I had been introduced to this organization, Geekdom, which is here to help build startups. And I ended up finding out that its core reason for existing was to help reshape what downtown San Antonio identity is. And it was going to be kind of a catalyst or a factory of sorts to help pump out new startups to fill the economy here in San Antonio. And it was going to, it was dead set on changing the identity and making an impact. And those were things that just really gravitated towards who I was inside. And then it brought me all the way back to being back home and being around Detroit and Flint, which at that time for the, couple decades that I lived up in Michigan were not doing great. And here I had this opportunity to be a part of a journey and a story where we were reshaping what San Antonio meant. This is now my home. This is where I'm raising my kids. This meant the world to me to be a part of something that I could be so close to and so impactful in. So I had to jump on board. And it was not as the current role that I'm talking to you today. I was not being offered CEO. I was being offered basically the same role that I had at Apple, which was help guiding these small businesses with the resources that Geekdom offered to find the next step and to help guide them through a journey that I now hold so close to my heart. And then hopefully creating and helping them become impactful companies for San Antonio's future.
Wow. I hear this deep sense of purpose in your decision to join Geekdom. And as you joined Geekdom, were there certain things or traits that helped you differentiate yourself from the pack? Because clearly you did not join as a CEO. You took a lateral move to join this newer organization versus an iconic company like Apple, where you had a pretty set career trajectory. So what did you truly do that brought you here?
It's a great question. And I think that I latched onto two things that I brought from my past. I'll say three, because I mentioned one already, which is this strong sense of honor towards my home. And, this being my home, being a part of building it up was something that really spoke to me. And the other two things were things that I pulled from the military. And one of those was being very mission oriented. Again, Geekdom's mission here at that time was to build San Antonio through creation of startups. And we used to say it was the place where startups were born. And so for me, I took that mission at heart. And that was something that I had brought from the military, was always keeping that mission top of mind and making sure that we're all working towards it and then rallying people behind that one mission. And the second thing that I took from my time in the military was how to lead others. And it brings me back to when I was that instructor and the feeling that I had in helping these, 10 to 20 students that I would have at any given time, getting them all rallied behind a very specific cause and making them understand this is where we're heading and directing them to that point and just getting everybody energized. And one of the things that I was also introduced to here at Geekdom that I hold really close to my heart is a thing called Strength Finders. And it's a Gallup test that we take. Yeah. And for me, when I took it, I learned that my number one strength, my superpower was individualization. And that really spoke to me because what that means, or at least how I translate what it means, is I want to understand what makes a person tick. And once I understand what makes that person tick, I have the ability to understand kind of patterns and how they're going to play out in certain situations, how to put them in a really good team, and then direct them towards the mission. And so with those kind of powers combined, I am Captain Planet. But anyways, I ended up utilizing those powers and creating this pathway forward where it gave me this opportunity about a year and a half on my journey here to step in as CEO and really kind of see this vision, which I had been creating in my mind of what Geekdom could be, and actually go about building that out. And it has been an amazing journey so far.
That is so fascinating. And I have to say, Charles, having known you for a while, I know you're a lifelong learner and continually reinventing yourself, whether it's through reading, investing in your own self, and how you made this journey now leading Geekdom. It epitomizes your investment in yourself and then in those around you, because that the leaders that invest in them also are deeply concerned about investing in developing those around them. And that's so powerful. And I loved your analogies from the military and those traits that you brought on. I don't have any military experience, nor do I have anybody up for in the military to date. But the closest encounter I've had with anyone in military was my grandfather when I was young and growing up in India. He served the Indian police in New Delhi for his entire life. And clearly he was not in the military, so he was not fighting wars and battles and not on big assignments, but he was clearly in the city, protecting the city, and he led groups and divisions when there were riots within the city where he would be away for not just days, but weeks, and we wouldn't even see him. And the one trait that I saw in him and something I've tried to incorporate in me is the sense of discipline that gets injected into those people that serve the country, because no matter what they do, it's just ingrained in their DNA, and they operate with so much discipline and finesse, and they have a lot more self-control than most people would. And that's one trait that stuck with me. And so clearly your story of bringing those key traits from the military and leveraging them in the corporate business ecosystem, it spoke to me very well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And thanks for sharing that story.
Yeah, of course. And so now with Geekdom, Charles, you clearly are at the top of the organization. And one of the key roles that your organization has is to vet ideas and entrepreneurs and figure out if that idea is ready for prime time and if this entrepreneur has potential for success. So are there any specific traits that you look at, Charles, when you have conversations with these emerging leaders that you could share with us?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And it's one of those that's really hard to quantify what trait specifically it is or what to assign it to. But one thing that I try my best to assign it to is really a level of desire to learn about the solution that they're creating beyond just what their general knowledge of it may be. Because I think that you or I could turn, the corner of our offices and go and talk to anybody, and they have an idea that's in the back of their head that they've been thinking about that they think is a potential company, right? But really, it's when you take that switch, when it becomes something that you cannot help but dig into further. You go online and you start doing research, you start to understand, okay, this idea that I have, does it actually have other people who are dealing with the same problems that I am? And you typically see that from somebody who has experience in a specific field. So let's say, utilizing me as an example, I dealt with Apple products so much that if I left and I came up with, oh, let me think of a great way to manage Apple products for a company. This is something that I've had to do here at Geekdom, and taking that lesson learned and being like, okay, I understand how it works on this end. I understand what a company leader needs in order to manage it. And then creating a company out of that is something that you'll see out of some of the best founders is somebody who has an intimate knowledge of what the problem they're trying to solve is. And so that's one of those like intangible traits, is somebody who has experience with the problem. And then the second thing is really just how, I guess, passionately they pursue figuring out how to solve that problem. And you can tell almost immediately, as soon as somebody comes up to you, if they have got an idea for a business and you're like, okay, well, tell me about it. And they tell you about it. And, you can tell almost immediately how succinctly they're able to wrap it up means that they're able to tell you how much they've thought about it. The longer that you think about something, the more you can talk about it in a very short manner. And then also when you start asking questions, you're poking little holes and you're going to see how they fill those holes. Do they immediately have answers for them? Are they dismissing them? Those are really big indicators for how passionate they are about solving this problem. You don't want somebody who just dismisses a question, because a question that you're going to ask has something in it that really, is the very first thought that you had. You need to know, like, hey, does the market really need what you're looking for? Is there somebody willing to pay for what you're offering? And if they don't have an answer for those questions, or their answer is just like, well, yeah, I would, that's not enough. We need to know more. And if they dig deeper, if they've done their research, you can tell with just those few early questions. And then once you start asking them and you feel that they've given the effort there to at least be able to talk about the idea, then you start to dig deeper into other resources. Have you thought about financials? Have you created a lean canvas business model? Like, what have you done? And then you start figuring out, as an organization like Geekdom, where can we plug them in? What resources could we add on to them? What mentors can we give to them to be able to assist them in growing that idea and creating a viable business out of it?
Yeah, makes sense. And that's such a great list of success markers that you look for in those budding entrepreneurs. And my favorite there is a leader's ability to take feedback and how they show up in the face of adversity. Show up with that resilience. It has to be nurtured over the years, and nobody's born with it, but we have to condition ourselves that way. And I wonder, Charles, as you engage with those entrepreneurs, do you also pay attention to their nonverbals? Even if at all, what are they?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think some nonverbals that you get is how relaxed they seem to be while talking to you about it. You want somebody who's, who realizes the gravity of the situation. Just talking about your business to anybody, you want to be there. You want to be present. If they're not present, you can feel that immediately with their nonverbals. And then also going back to that kind of dismissiveness that you can get when you start asking questions, you'll see that written over their faces. If somebody asks a question and they're like, hey, have you thought about this? And then they just kind of like, kind of shrug it off, and then they move about their answer. It's clear that they haven't really given it the thought that they need. But if they kind of lean in and they talk about it a little bit more passionately, then you can see, okay, they've done their research. They understand how important the question is. And they've already thought about how to tackle it if they do encounter that problem or that hurdle, whatever it is. Yeah, you can definitely pick up on nonverbals almost more so than you can with their own voice.
Yeah. And I've heard that more than 93% of our communication is actually nonverbal. It's those other cues, the body language, the eye contact, the confidence that makes such a big difference. So I hear you there. And so, Charles, nice. Now I'd love to explore another facet of you. Clearly, as a CEO, you experience a lot of pressure. And I'm pretty sure there are days when things aren't going your way. And so are there any typical practices that you turn to be able to diffuse that pressure and stay calm and composed amidst all that chaos?
Yeah, there are. And I'll tell you a little bit, I'll open up to you and I'll be honest. One of the things that I've struggled with from the moment that I was appointed as CEO here at Geekdom, I've dealt really heavily with imposter syndrome. And I think that it really pulls from where I came from. I didn't have the traditional journey to become a CEO. I kind of went from the military to Apple. Like, that's not a normal journey to then lead a company but it was the passion that I had that really kept me pushing forward and kind of finding a way to deal with that imposter syndrome. And luckily, I owe a lot to a mentor of mine right when I was given the opportunity to step in as CEO. It was a mentor, and actually the very first guy I talked to here at Geekdom, his name is Dax Moreno, and he ended up, when I first walked into Geekdom, he was the one who kind of pulled back the curtain and showed me the overall mission of what Geekdom was doing and got me inspired to be here. And then as I transitioned into CEO, he gave me a book. That day that I found out, he had given me a book that was called The Daily Stoic. And The Daily Stoic is a book. I forgot the authors right now. I think it's like Ryan Holiday or something along those lines. But it basically has every day of the year, 366 potential days, that has in there. You open up the book every morning and it has a 1-page, real quick, a Stoic saying. So you have like Marcus Aurelius or somebody like that and something that they've said in the past. And then it has a more modern interpretation of what that Stoic mindset means. And it is amazing. And it has been something that right when I took over as CEO, I latched onto that book. Every single morning I woke up, I would get ready, jump in the shower. And as soon as I got out, I would read that page of the day, and it would help center myself for what I was about to walk into. And just I think I can't attribute it to every success that I've had from being here, but I think that it's helped me pull back from certain situations you may find yourself pigeonholed into. And it's helped me kind of keep the mission at the front of my mind, making sure that I'm working towards it, baby steps sometimes or leaps and bounds at others. It has been one thing that I've latched onto. And it's funny, I just started picking that book back up about 2 weeks ago. And one of the things that I did this time around is, as a bookmark of it, I put 3 annual goals I have for myself for this next year. And I keep that as my placeholder. So every morning I open up, I look at, hey, how are you doing on these 3 things? And then you read the message of the day, and then I go about my day. And it has been so helpful of late.
Wow. And I have to say, Charles, first, thank you for opening up and sharing your story and also sharing your own fears. Because out there in the world, especially on social media, all we see is how great people are and how confident they feel. But deep inside, we all have fears. And especially hearing from you, somebody that runs this big organization as a CEO, and recognizing that even you have had to deal with fears. And even till this date, you're dealing with those fears. But it's not about being fearless. It's really about mustering the courage to keep going, moving towards the purpose that we have in life and your journey. And we just have to be ready to that different way of being. And it's so powerful. And I love the book recommendation, The Daily Stoic. I'm adding it to my reading list. It sounds so powerful. And the other piece that you mentioned here is looking at the goals every day. And it has to do with strengthening our own belief in those goals and reminding ourselves of those goals every single day. And I can see how powerful that can be. And I'm sure that's something that you inspire many others to do every day, especially the entrepreneurs, to stay laser focused on the mission they've got at hand, right?
Yeah. You want to have a North Star, and you want to create milestones along that journey so that you can just verify that you are making progress and that you're not stuck in one place. It's something that I love to do, and just kind of setting out those markers. It doesn't mean you have to hit them every time, but at least you can track your progress by knowing, am I there? Am I beyond there? Or am I short of there? How do I adjust? And it's very, very helpful.
Great. Absolutely. I just want to ask you if you have any other parting words for the listeners here.
Yeah, I think the last thing I'll say really goes back to that book recommendation. It does not have to be that book, but I highly recommend that, everybody who is working towards some major goal in their life, take a moment every day, whether it's at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, and really center yourself around what that is and help progress who you are. And so again, I use the Daily Stoic, and it is something that is so powerful for me to kind of keep in mind who I am, where I'm heading, and how I'm making as far as progress goes towards that goal. It's so powerful. And I highly recommend that for anybody specifically somebody like myself dealing with imposter syndrome is something to keep you centered, keep that reality in the front of you, and making sure that all the distractions go to the wayside.
And what a powerful piece of wisdom that is. So thank you for sharing that with us, Charles, and for sharing your journey and a piece of you with the listeners. I really appreciate you, and what a delight it's been to have you here. Thanks again.
Thank you for having me.
There is no better time than now to stop playing small and tap into your zone of genius. With a Boardroom Zen executive coach by your side, experience the game-changing transformation, both internally and externally. Find out more on boardroomzen.com. And thank you for listening to my show. It means so much to me. I'd love for you to subscribe and leave a review on your favorite listening platform. More power to you, and hope to see you soon.